On Monday evening, around 6:15, the doorbell rang, and to my surprise, it was my cousin Ralph. I rarely get home before midnight, so I figured he'd forgotten my schedule. After inviting him in, I got him a beer, and we watched Monday Night Football while chatting. Ralph seemed disappointed that my wife, Lois, wasn't home. She had called earlier to say she'd be grabbing a drink with her coworkers after work and would join us later. I was looking forward to her arrival. Lois and I hadn't been intimate for over 3 weeks, and she often claimed she was too tired or had a headache. Ralph left around 8 o'clock, and I stayed up, eventually dozing off in front of the TV, which is a rare occurrence for me. When I woke up, Lois's car was parked outside, but she hadn't come to fetch me for bed, which I found odd. Later, we ended up being intimate, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Lois often found reasons to say no, and it made me question my worth as her partner. After weeks of this pattern, she asked me if she felt too loose, a question that puzzled me. I assured her she was perfect for me, though I suspected she wasn't being truthful. From my perspective, honesty about physical compatibility was important, but it had to be handled carefully. Despite my love for Lois, doubts had lingered since she accepted my proposal, leaving me uncertain about our future. Returning to my attempts to wake a slumbering Lois for some affection, she muttered groggily, "Oh, it's you." My disappointment at finding her asleep turned into anger. "Who did you think it was, you miserable cow?" I exploded, unable to contain my frustration. "What's going on? Who are you with?" Storming off the bed, I snatched my shorts from the floor and headed downstairs. Grabbing a beer, I retreated to the patio to cool off and process the encounter. It seemed like she was interested at first, but when she realized it was me, she changed her tone, almost dismissively, like, "Great, him again." As I stared at the night sky, I started to wonder if her claims about spending time with friends were even true. Doubt began creeping in, and then it hit me. How could I even afford to hire a detective to uncover her secrets? It seemed like she could read my mind but felt no remorse, as if she thought, "Oh well, he knows now." Feeling restless, I decided to watch TV. I found a blank tape, popped it into the VCR, and planned to watch last week's NCIS. But what I saw on the tape left me frozen. The video revealed everything. I paused it and quietly went upstairs, finding Lois already asleep. Returning downstairs, I resumed the tape and saw my wife with my cousin Ralph in the bedroom. The camera angle made it clear it was hidden in the closet, capturing everything. The betrayal stung deeply, and questions flooded my mind about how many times this had happened. Suddenly, a stranger's voice broke the silence. "What did I do to deserve this?" Lois's panicked exclamations grabbed my attention. She frantically dialed a number, urging someone to answer. Seizing the phone, I confronted her, causing her to recoil in fear. "Why don't you retrieve the tape, Ralph?" I demanded, warning him to stay away from me. "Thanks to you and my idiot cousin, I don't need a private investigator. You handed me all the evidence." I spat. Lois trembled and asked, "What will you do? What do you think?" "I'm divorcing you," I snapped. "I don't want a divorce," she pleaded. I scoffed. "Why not? You clearly don't care about me." Ordering her to leave, I hid the tape and made coffee, compiling a to-do list for the morning. Though our state lacked a no-fault divorce law, infidelity could sway the court's property division. Discovering her infidelity surprised me, but at least I hadn't added her to the house deed. As I made the list, I heard Lois leave. I pondered how quickly love had turned to hate and focused on what I could do next, grateful for the resources available online. As I headed to my room, I noticed the blank tape I'd left on the TV was gone. I smiled, hoping Lois had taken it without watching it. Back at my computer, I began securing my finances, transferring most of our joint account funds to my personal savings and canceling joint credit cards while leaving my own intact gave me some peace of mind. Satisfied with my efforts to protect myself, I slept soundly. The next morning, I went to the bank, secured a safe deposit box in my name only, and transferred valuables from the one Lois accessed. At the office, I instructed my secretary to intercept any messages from Lois, informing her of our impending divorce. With each step, I felt more prepared to face the challenges ahead. Myra informed me that Alan wanted to meet me urgently. When I arrived at his office, Shirley, his assistant, directed me straight to him. "You're late, bad timing," Alan said as I entered. "You need to be on the next flight to Atlanta. Morgan's company is refusing to sign a new contract, and I need you to handle it." I expressed hesitation, explaining my need to deal with Lois, who posed a threat to my home in my absence. Alan reassured me, offering to handle the legal matters through his trusted lawyer, Bert Ellsworth, whom he highly recommended. Shirley reserved my flight, and Alan arranged for me to contact Ellsworth on my way to the airport. I reluctantly accepted the assignment, recognizing its importance despite my personal concerns. Rushing home, I packed and secured the house before heading to the airport. On the way, I contacted Ellsworth, who provided advice and assured me of his assistance. After navigating airport security, I checked in at the Delta counter and waited in the boarding area. While I waited, I spun a story to Ellsworth about Ralph's threats to Lois, fabricating details to justify the restraining order. "If he tries anything, I'll knock some sense into him," I falsely assured Ellsworth. I added, "I overheard Lois saying she'd love to watch," to make the story more convincing. Though the story wasn't true, I felt justified considering Lois's own deceptions. Ellsworth assured me the restraining order was feasible but warned there would be a hearing in 10 days to finalize it. My trip to Atlanta was productive, and I swiftly resolved the contract issue, earning Alan's praise. He informed me of the locksmith visit and his son-in-law's plan to safeguard the house during my trip. I also made courtesy visits to 2 other clients before boarding Flight 720 home. Checking my phone, I found multiple missed calls and voicemails, mostly from Lois. I deleted her messages but listened to Ellsworth's urgent plea to call him before matters escalated. His voicemail confirmed he had secured a protective order that afternoon and would serve it on Lois at her workplace the next morning. I was grateful for Alan's recommendation. Returning home at midnight, a sheriff's deputy approached me and asked for ID. After showing my driver's license, I thanked him for watching the house, assuming he was Alan's brother-in-law. He handed me a ring of keys and explained that all the locks in the house had been changed to use the same key. He also mentioned that Lois had visited twice and gotten angry when denied entry. Inside, I noticed the answering machine blinking but was too exhausted to check it. I turned off the phone and went to bed. In the morning, I played the messages, all from Lois, repeating the same plea for me to call her. "Too late, honey," I thought as I deleted them. At work, Myra informed me that Lois had been persistently calling, but assured me she hadn't connected with her. I thanked Myra for her support, and she joked, "You say that to all the girls," as I kissed her forehead. In Alan's office, I updated him on the situation and thanked him for his help. "What's next?" Alan asked. "Get on with life," I replied. "Maybe find someone who'll put up with me." Alan encouraged me, saying things would improve over time. Returning to my office, I focused on work and called Ellsworth, who confirmed that the divorce papers would be filed by 10 a.m. He offered to serve them to Lois before lunch, and I agreed. Shortly after, Myra invited me to lunch and we went to Trake. She offered her support, knowing how challenging divorce can be. "I could use some cheering up," I admitted. Myra smiled and handed me a piece of paper. "Here's today's attempt to cheer you up." Glancing at it, I saw a list of names. "What's this?" I asked. "A list of girls interested in you now that you're single again," she replied. Flipping through the list, I noticed a few surprises. Liz Pfizer from accounting? Isn't she engaged? She was, but she kicked him out after catching him cheating, Myra explained. "Do you really think she's into me?" I asked. "I know she is," Myra said confidently. "She once told me she'd snatch you up if you were single." I scanned the list again. 7 names, and besides Liz, 2 others caught my attention. "So, you're saying they're all interested?" "I've heard them say so," she confirmed. I grinned. "I notice your name isn't here." "I considered it, but given the circumstances, I'd rather not," she said. "Why not?" I asked. "Because, besides being married, you've just started your divorce due to your wife's cheating," she reasoned. I figured dating a married woman wouldn't be on your mind. I thought you and Harold were solid, I remarked. We were, until I found out he was cheating with his secretary, she admitted. But instead of divorce, I'm opting for kindness. You're wrong. Even knowing you're married wouldn't stop me. You should have put your name on here, I said. You'd be perfect for me right now. Now I know you're joking. I'm far from perfect, she laughed. That's where you're mistaken, I teased. You have one quality they all lack. And what's that? She asked curiously. You're married, and they're not, I said with a smirk. You'll have to explain that, she replied, raising an eyebrow. Right now, I don't need an emotional connection, I explained. It'd be too easy to get involved with any of the three on your list that I'm interested in. But you're already committed and seem focused on retaliation with your husband. If we got involved, it would be strictly physical. Are you serious? She asked. Absolutely, I affirmed. Don't get me wrong. I'd never pursue a married woman, but if she's free, that's a different story. What about a long lunch then? She suggested. Not today, but tomorrow I'm free, I agreed. It's a date, she said with a playful smile. Later that day, at 2:45, Lois called. Knowing she had likely been served the papers, I answered. What do you need? I asked bluntly. Why can't I get into the house? What's with the divorce? Why aren't my credit cards working? And the protection order? She demanded. Just protecting my sanity, I replied curtly. Your cards are inactive because divorcing a cheating wife involves canceling her access to them. You can't enter the house because you don't live here anymore, and I don't want you inside. You need to stop this, Dave. Losing half your assets over a little fling. It meant nothing. I love only you, Lois pleaded. I see it differently. You cheated, and that makes you a strumpet in my eyes, which is why I filed for divorce. I retorted. We should discuss this face to face, she insisted. Surprisingly, I agreed. Where and when? She asked. Not tonight, I replied. I've barred you from the house. You can't keep me out, she protested. Actually, I can. The house is mine, not yours. You'll retrieve your belongings with a court official present to ensure fairness, I stated firmly. Let's just talk it out, she suggested. Not here, I insisted. You're being unreasonable. Where, then? Lois demanded. Tomorrow, 6 p.m., I replied. Angelina's restaurant. It'll give us some privacy, I proposed before ending the call. As I hung up, I wondered if Lois truly believed her excuses could sway me. Sadly, the answer was probably yes. Why wouldn't she? I'd let her off the hook for years. That evening, after work, I decided to stop by the Landing Strip Lounge, hoping for a little pick-me-up. It was open mic night, and I figured some laughs might do me good. Sitting at the bar, Karen greeted me. The usual, Dave? She asked. I usually get a PBR and some good company, I replied. Well, I've got a keeper, Karen said, pouring my beer. As I sipped my drink, a woman took the stage to perform stand-up comedy. A surveyor stopped by Will's farm in eastern Minnesota and announced he had some bad news. I've discovered that your farm isn't in Minnesota. It's actually in Wisconsin. Will let out a huge sigh of relief and said, That's the best news I've gotten in a while. I was just telling my wife this morning that I don't think I could stand another winter in Minnesota. The audience laughed, including me. She continued, The New York City Department of Education reports that only 26% of the city's 3rd through 8th graders passed the English exam. But on the other hand, they're too bad at math to realize how bad it is. 2 more comedians followed her act, and by the time I left the lounge, I felt much better than when I arrived. Maybe there's some truth to the old saying that laughter is the best medicine. The next morning at work, I settled in at my desk, only to have Myra remind me of our lunch plans. Despite a busy morning, we headed out for lunch at 11:30. On the way to the Marriott, I asked her if she preferred to eat before or after. She chuckled. Being entertained on a full stomach slows me down a tad. At check-in, I used the alias Mr. and Mrs. Ralph Tomlinson. A cheeky nod to Lois's affection for donkeys. Once we were in the room, we didn't waste any time, getting straight to lovemaking. The rest of the day passed quickly, and soon it was time to meet Lois at Angelina's. Arriving ahead of her, I secured a booth in the quietest corner, far from the dance floor. I ordered my usual drink and settled in to wait. Lois arrived 5 minutes later, looking as stunning as ever. Normally, her appearance would stir certain feelings in me, but knowing what she'd done dulled any impulse. As she sat down, Lois ordered her customary Cosmo and looked visibly irritated when I asked for separate checks. Sipping my beer, I prompted her. "All right, Lois, you called this meeting. So, what's on your mind?" "Honestly, Dave, you could have been more courteous given the circumstances," she replied. "Lois, you're lucky I haven't torn you apart. Speak up, or I'll walk out," I said bluntly. With a sigh, she began. "You're blowing things out of proportion, Dave. We don't need to divorce. I love you. I always have, always will. My affair with Ralph means nothing to me. Yes, it happened, but it was just physical. Most of the time, I can't even stand him. He's never posed a threat to you or our marriage. If he means nothing to you, then why did you prioritize him over me?" I shot back. "I didn't," she insisted. "Yes, you did. Think about the past 6 months. How often have you been there for me? Mostly reluctantly, doing me favors. Think about the last 3 weeks. I've listened to your excuses every night while you've been out, enjoying yourself. And you call that love? Being exclusive to me? It hasn't been that bad," she said defensively. "Oh, it certainly has. For 3 weeks, you've been avoiding me. When you finally stayed home, you went straight to bed and slept. When I tried to initiate something, you were all for it, until you realized it was me. Remember that, Lois? Oh, it's you. I'm tired. Leave me alone. That's what you said. That, said everything. And then I found that tape. That was the last straw." "Then why even tell Ralph those things?" she asked. "Because Ralph likes hearing it," she admitted. "He has this pathetic need to feel superior to you. I tell him those things to boost his ego. There's nothing wrong with you in bed, Dave. You've always satisfied me," Lois said. "Then why seek pleasure with someone else?" I asked. "It's not someone else, Dave. It's only Ralph." "So you don't consider it cheating if it's just Ralph?" I pressed. "That's not what I meant," she muttered. "Regardless of whether it's one man or many, being with another man while married is cheating, no matter how you try to spin it." "Answer me this," she countered. "Before you saw that tape, would you have said our marriage was good?" "Maybe okay, but not great," I admitted. "I dated Ralph before we got married, and it didn't affect us," she said. "Wait. Did you entertain my idiot cousin before we tied the knot?" I asked, narrowing my eyes. "Yes, I did," she admitted. "Then why marry me at all?" I demanded. "Because I love you, Dave. I don't even like Ralph that much." "Then why are you still enjoying yourself with him?" "Because he provides something you can't," she said bluntly. "Look at it this way, Dave. Think of Ralph as just assisting you with me. You're crazy if you think you can convince me of that," I snapped. "If that's all you want to discuss, then we're finished." I began to rise from my seat when she interjected. "You'll never persuade me that infidelity is acceptable, Dave. You lack any evidence to back that claim. Don't forget, I have the tape you and Ralph generously made for me," I reminded her. "Are you certain?" she asked, a hint of doubt in her voice. "Absolutely," I affirmed, turning my back on her and walking toward the door. As I reached for the car door handle, a grin crept onto my face. Apparently, she hadn't checked the tape she'd taken from the house, unaware it was blank. Just then, I heard the sharp click of her heels behind me. I turned to see Lois half walking, half running toward me in her high heels. I couldn't help but marvel at her speed in them. "I need to get into the house, Dave," she pleaded. "I need my clothes and belongings." Though I knew I was being insensitive, I felt entitled to it. "Have your lawyer contact mine to arrange it?" I replied as I slid into the car. Rolling down the window, I added, "Goodbye, Lois," before driving off. "Wait, Dave, just a minute," she called after me. I could have let her follow me home and retrieve her things. It wouldn't have been an inconvenience. But in that moment, I thought, forget her. If she didn't already have a lawyer, it would take her a day or two to find one. Since it was Thursday, I wagered the soonest she could secure one would be Monday, with another day needed to organize her return to the house. By then, I'd have packed all her belongings into garbage bags, with little care for how it was done. If I were lucky, she'd have to take everything to the dry cleaner or laundromat before using it. Was I resentful toward Lois? Not really. My relationship with Lois had been on smooth waters for too long. That night I slept soundly. On Friday, I had another long lunch with Myra. As a particularly busy period came to a close, she asked about my weekend plans. When I admitted I had none, she proposed, "Would you like to spend the weekend with me?" "I'd love to. But how will you keep it from your husband?" I asked. "He's going fishing this weekend," she explained. "He packed up this morning. We leave straight from work. I'm at your disposal from now until noon on Sunday, if you need me, that is." "Silly girl," I teased. "Let's see. Dinner and dancing tonight, then playtime at home. Saturday morning, more playtime. Dinner and dancing Saturday night, followed by more play at home. Sunday morning we play until noon, then brunch." "Sound good." "Sounds great. But how about we skip the dancing and focus on the playing?" she suggested with a grin. "That won't do," I laughed. "Your energy never seems to fade. But mine needs a break sometimes." "All right then, your plan it is," she agreed. After returning to work, I told her I'd pick her up at 7. "Pack for the weekend," I instructed. "You won't be returning until Sunday." When I got home, I discovered Lois hadn't wasted any time finding a lawyer. Upon entering the bedroom to change, I noticed part of her dressing room was bare. Most of her belongings were gone. Curious, I began investigating how it had happened. I found a broken window in the family room facing the patio. Though I couldn't prove Lois was responsible, I derived some satisfaction from spotting blood on the glass shards. It seemed she might have injured herself climbing in. I located a glass company in the Yellow Pages, scheduled an appointment for the next day, and decided to leave the mess until morning. With that decision made, I headed upstairs, showered, and dressed for my evening with Myra. We dined, danced, and indulged in drinks, but even though we retired at 11 o'clock, sleep didn't come until 3 a.m., leaving me utterly exhausted. After Myra had her fill of me, I set my watch for 9 o'clock, anticipating the glazier's arrival between 10 o'clock and 12 o'clock. However, Myra woke me at 7:20 in a rather delightful manner. While waiting for the glazier, I tidied up the broken glass, finishing just as he arrived at 10:10. By 10:40, the window was repaired, and by 11 o'clock, Myra and I were enjoying a late breakfast at Tracky's. After our meal, I asked Myra what she'd like to do next. "Just relax and cuddle. That's all I want," she said, and that's exactly what we did. Buoyed by our spirits, we opted to order pizza for dinner and continued our leisurely day. We decided against any intimacy on a full stomach, choosing instead to lounge on the couch and watch TV for an hour or two. However, our TV time was abruptly interrupted mid-program. Sunday morning dawned, bringing with it the realization that I'd have to return Myra to her husband. This thought sparked an idea, which I voiced over pancakes at the Village Inn. "How much time do we have left?" I asked. "What do you mean?" Myra responded, a bit puzzled. "When are you planning to leave me?" I clarified. "Why do you think I'll leave you?" she questioned. "From what you've mentioned about flirting with your husband," I explained, "I got the impression you were just casually flirting, not in a serious relationship." "Maybe, but that wasn't my intention," Myra admitted. "Typically, the men I've encountered became possessive, wanting me to leave Harold for them. But none of them could match Harold's lifestyle. I couldn't imagine trading a comfortable home in a nice neighborhood for a one-bedroom apartment where I'd have to worry about affording bills every month. Plus, they weren't any better in bed than Harold, and they were messy. "And you always wore your wedding rings," I added, trying to piece it together. "I wasn't looking for a replacement for Harold. I just wanted retribution." she confessed. Keeping them around if they were good in bed didn't mean I was emotionally attached. I still don't get it. If they started stalking you, knowing you were married, do you think you could ever trust them enough to make the relationship permanent? I asked. So, I'm just another casual fling? I pressed, feeling the sting of her words. Don't be ridiculous, of course not, she said firmly. I've been working for you for over 5 years now, and in all that time you've never once flirted with me. Consider what brought us here. I pretty much gave you an open invitation. You made it clear you'd never pursue a married woman, and you didn't. I offered, and you had the good sense not to refuse. If anything, I'll be the one to end it, Myra assured me. But if that happens, it won't be anytime soon. So, I asked with a grin, do we have time for one more before you have to go? To take you home, I replied with a grin. Myra smiled, and we drove off. As I retired Sunday night, I felt like one of the happiest men in the state. Maybe even the entire neighborhood. During my Monday commute to work, I reflected on my relationship with Myra and came to a sobering realization. It couldn't continue as it had over the weekend. I was suing Lois for infidelity, and if she hired a competent lawyer, one of their first moves would be to dig up something on me to use as leverage. If I got caught with Myra, Lois could easily use her against me. Still, I wasn't willing to go without Myra entirely for the duration of the divorce. I'd already endured enough deprivation while married to my unfaithful wife. When I arrived at work, I summoned Myra to my office to explain the dilemma and get her input. I have a couple of ideas, but I'm not sure if they're feasible, she began. Tell me and let's see, I encouraged. You have 3 uncomfortable customer chairs here. You should replace them with a comfortable couch so visitors can sit more comfortably, she suggested. I can arrange that, I agreed. Then, since you often stay late at work, I could stay late to assist you. After the new couch is installed, you'll leave first, and I'll wait 10 or 15 minutes before leaving to make sure anyone watching you doesn't see me leave, she proposed. That should work, I concluded. Here's another option, she continued. I'll leave for lunch before you. You can head to the hotel, book a room, and call me with the room number. Once I arrive, I'll take the elevator to the 2nd floor where the conference rooms are, then use the stairs to reach the designated floor. However, we can't do this too often. Attending too many conferences might arouse suspicion. To make it look legitimate, you could hang a "Do Not Disturb" sign on one of the conference room doors before anyone else arrives. Ultimately, they'd need to see us together for this to work, I pointed out. But if we arrive and depart separately, we should be fine. I instructed Myra to schedule the conference for the next day and sent her back to work. It was a busy day, and I didn't get around to ordering the couch until about 4 o'clock. Without waiting for approval, I ordered and paid for it myself. At 5 o'clock, I called Myra into my office and told her she needed to let her husband know she'd be working late on Thursday, as the couch would be delivered around noon. How did you arrange everything with Ahern in accounting so quickly? She asked. I handled it myself, no need to involve them, I replied. Seeing no one around, Myra kissed me despite the door to my office being open. I was hoping we wouldn't have to wait until Thursday, she remarked. Don't forget about tomorrow's conference with the Ajax guys, I reminded her. Shoot, how did I forget? She exclaimed. Despite the good spirits I was in, my mood shifted when I arrived home to find Lois's car parked in the middle of the driveway, blocking access to the garage. I parked accordingly, got out of my car, and walked toward her as she approached me. We need to talk, Dave. Things are escalating, she said. Ignoring her, I brushed past and headed to her car. Opening the door, I reached for her purse, tipped its contents onto the seat, counted the money, pocketed it, and tossed the purse back on top of the pile. You still owe me $14 for the broken window. We have nothing more to discuss, I asserted. Dave, I love you. I don't want a divorce. We can work through this. It doesn't have to end, Lois pleaded. No, Lois. There's no way to salvage this, especially after learning you betrayed me before we were even married. It's over between us, I declared. Lois looked deflated. I had hoped you'd see reason, but deep down, I knew you wouldn't. If you're set on divorce, I'll fight you. I won't accept infidelity, and I won't settle for a 70-30 property split, she said, her tone sharpening. She warned, I'm sorry you won't hold yourself accountable for what you did to me, but infidelity remains a fact. You'll have to prove it, Dave, and you can't. It'll be your word against mine, and I'll deny it vehemently. I'll claim you're trying to swindle me out of my fair share of our property. You might even face consequences for it. You seem to forget I have visual evidence of your infidelity with my cousin, I countered. No, Dave, I haven't forgotten, she replied smugly. I grabbed that tape when I left the house and promptly destroyed it. It's your word against mine now, and without proof, you'll lose. You destroyed it? Ralph will never forgive you for that. He desperately needed that tape. He might even lose interest in you because of it. Can you grasp that? I shot back. I don't care about Ralph, she said flatly. Yes, I wanted what he offered, but I don't need it. I need you. I shrugged and said, You still owe me $14 for the window. Then I distanced myself from her and entered the house. She persisted relentlessly, pounding on the door and ringing the bell for a solid 10 minutes before finally retreating. Watching her walk down the driveway, I smirked. It was obvious she had destroyed the tape without ever checking its contents. A surprise awaited her. I wanted her to hire a lawyer and contest the divorce. I wanted her to accrue debt, spend thousands on legal fees, only to discover that I still had the tape, rendering all her efforts futile. That night, I slept peacefully. My Tuesday conference call with the Ajax representatives went smoothly, leaving me in high spirits. Upon returning home from work Wednesday, things weren't too shabby either, especially when Myra suggested a quick encounter on my desk at the end of the day. After ensuring everyone had left, I acquiesced. Once we were done, I reminded her about her late shift on Thursday. On my way home, I decided to stop by the Landing Strip Lounge, my favorite restaurant. Unbeknownst to me, it was open mic night, which made finding a seat a challenge. Eventually, I secured a spot at the bar. I happened to be present when Bobby Denton handed the microphone to a trailer repair mechanic from Triple T Sales and Service in Franktown. The man, surprisingly intelligent, held degrees in both electrical and mechanical engineering. One day, while driving home, he heard a radio commercial that he believed to be a blatant falsehood. Inspired, he sketched out plans for a lying robot. Returning home, he refined his blueprint and constructed the robot in his basement workshop over 6 weeks. When it was completed, he tested it in his living room, coincidentally just as his 14-year-old son arrived home 2 hours late. When the man inquired about the delay, his son claimed he had lost track of time while playing cards with friends. With a lull in the proceedings, I finished my beer and left for home. The following day brought 2 positive developments. First, my lawyer informed me that Lois's legal counsel had reached out, confirming her intent to contest the divorce. This news brought a smile to my face. Second, the black leather couch I had ordered was delivered. Choosing leather had been strategic, anticipating the inevitable stains it would endure. This foresight proved useful, as Myra and I left a few marks on it later that afternoon. The subsequent weeks flew by, marked by frequent encounters with Myra, mostly on the couch after work. However, on 3 occasions we made use of the conference room, acknowledging the superior comfort of the bed over the couch. During this time, Lois called me almost daily, claiming she needed me and insisting I couldn't win. She suggested we accept the past, move forward together, and forget everything. Though I could have ended the calls by changing my phone number, I derived a perverse satisfaction from reminding her she was wasting her time. Meanwhile, Ellsworth and Lois's lawyer remained busy with legal matters. I could only hope her lawyer billed by the hour, while I had negotiated a flat fee with Ellsworth, leaving me indifferent to how long the proceedings took. Ellsworth was aware of the tape's existence, but he never disclosed it to Lois's attorney. During negotiations, the opposing counsel proposed that if I agreed to change the grounds for divorce from infidelity to irreconcilable differences and allowed an equal property division, Lois would stop resisting. I instructed Ellsworth to counter with a 65-35 split instead of 70-30, knowing she wouldn't accept. Ellsworth informed me that he would have to notify the opposing party about the tape before presenting it to the judge, as failing to attempt a settlement could anger the court. I authorized him to use his discretion. That's what I was paying him for, after all. At the same time, I started noticing a stranger who seemed to be shadowing me wherever I went. It might have been paranoia, but I suspected Lois had someone tailing me. Another week passed, and Ellsworth called to inform me that Lois and her attorney wanted to meet. I instructed him to arrange it and let me know the time. He later confirmed the meeting was set for Friday at 10 a.m. I arrived early at 9:30 to discuss strategy with Bert. We decided to bring the tape to the meeting, but I couldn't resist the urge to toy with Lois one last time. The meeting began with the usual pleasantries. Lois, as expected, denied the infidelity accusations, claiming I was being unreasonable. I decided it was time to intervene. "Do you remember the tape you and Ralph made, Lois?" I asked, watching her reaction closely. "No, I don't," she retorted confidently, clearly banking on the lack of evidence. "I'll make you a deal, Lois. Sign the papers now and I'll agree to a 60-40 split. But you only have 2 minutes to decide. If not, we'll leave it to the judge," I offered. "I won't agree, Dave. You have no proof," she replied stubbornly. "Sure, Lois. I have a tape of you and Ralph," I stated firmly, anticipating her reaction. As expected, she snapped. "Damn it, Dave. I already told you. I destroyed the damn tape." "Oh, so you admit to infidelity and destroying evidence?" I remarked, watching her eyes widen as she realized her mistake. "No, that's not what I meant," she backtracked, her confidence faltering. "Never mind, Lois," I said coldly. "I offered leniency, but your stubbornness, as usual, led you to reject it. Let the courts decide." At that point, Lois's lawyer interjected. "If you do have evidence, you'd better reveal it now." I gestured to Ellsworth. As he moved to press play on the TV VCR set up at the table's end, I issued a final warning. "This is your last chance, Lois. Agree to the 60-40 split now, or once he presses play, the offer is rescinded and we proceed to court." "Screw you, Dave. You've got nothing on me," she snapped. With that, Bert pressed play and I stood up. "See you in court, Lois," I declared before walking out of the room. Before I'd even left the building, my phone rang. It was Bert. "They're interested in making a deal," he informed me. "No thanks," I replied. I gave her an out and she refused. Full steam ahead. My actions only escalated Lois's phone calls. I disconnected the house phone, and Myra ensured no calls from Lois reached me at work. That left only my cell phone, which I deliberately kept unchanged to amuse myself with her unanswered calls. Meanwhile, Myra continued to provide all the excitement I needed. 3 days after the meeting with Lois and the attorneys, Myra approached me with a worried expression. "We've got a problem. A major one," she said. I panicked, fearing her husband had discovered our affair. "How serious is it?" I asked. "Pretty serious. Harold has to fly back to Ohio for some issues with his parents' inheritance. He'll be gone for a week," she explained. "So what's the dilemma?" I asked. "How do we manage a week together?" she replied. I pondered for a moment before suggesting. "Simple. You leave work half an hour before me, drive to my place, and park a block away. Make sure all the curtains are shut tight. When I get home, we'll have our time. In the mornings, I'll leave for work first, potentially drawing any pursuers away. After waiting to make sure the coast is clear, you'll head to work. We'll repeat this until the weekend, then come up with another plan." "And what about the weekend?" she asked. "How about this?" I suggested. "We keep up the routine during the week, but on Friday evening, when you return, we stay indoors all weekend. Can you handle spending 2.5 days with me?" "What I'm unsure of, dear, is whether I can survive 2.5 days with you," she teased. "We won't know until we try," I replied with a grin. We went through with the plan, and I made it through the weekend. However, when it was over, I felt a bit down. Myra returned home to reunite with her husband, and I realized how accustomed I'd grown to her presence. She provided good company, and we got along well. Yet deep down, I knew that once my divorce was finalized, I'd be seeking something more. I longed for a replacement for Lois, not just a partner, but someone who embodied the ideals of marriage I still valued. I yearned for a fulfilling relationship where I could fall asleep in the arms of a loving partner who would still be there in the morning. While I could envision such a connection with Myra, she had never explicitly suggested she would leave Harold. I sensed she was content enough with him, despite his occasional mistreatment, and prepared to stay with him as long as she could maintain her own sense of balance. Recalling the list that had initially ignited our affair, I mentally reviewed it. Among the names, there were 3 women who had caught my attention, but none of them seemed like suitable long-term partners. 2 of them smoked, a habit I detested after growing up in a household where both my parents were heavy smokers. Liz from accounting, the only smoker on the list, was undeniably attractive, but she was also much younger than me. I doubted we would have enough in common to build a meaningful relationship. A brief encounter with Liz in her office reinforced this belief. She had been listening to rap music, a genre I strongly disliked, which underscored the gap between us. While the idea of a fling with her was tempting, I couldn't see it leading to a lasting connection. These reflections occupied my mind during my Monday morning commute. Once I arrived at work, however, I found myself swamped with tasks, leaving little time to dwell on personal matters. In fact, I was so preoccupied that when Myra popped her head into my office to ask if we were going to lunch, I had to decline. Just before I wrapped up my workday, Bert Ellsworth called. He mentioned that Lois was eager to resolve the matter. "I understand your stance on bargaining," he said, "but offering her a 60-40 deal to sign immediately might be wise. Infidelity typically influences asset distribution, but with 2 out of the 7 divorce judges being women, they often lean toward a 50-50 split regardless of the grounds. We might end up with one of those judges, and settling now could be in your best interest." After about 30 seconds of thought, I instructed him to propose a 65-35 deal instead and gauge her response. Later, during a moment of downtime, Myra entered my office. She mentioned she'd missed her extended lunch break and requested some time on the couch. I granted her request, happy to oblige. The following morning at 10 o'clock, Ellsworth called to inform me that Lois had agreed to the 65-35 offer. He mentioned she would arrive on Wednesday at 5 o'clock to sign the papers and had requested a brief meeting with me. Although I saw little purpose in it beyond another chance to confront her, I wanted to wrap things up swiftly to avoid any further inconvenience to Myra. I told Bert I would be available at 2 o'clock to accommodate her request. We convened in the conference room, and I took a seat, waiting for Lois to speak her piece. Recognizing my silence, she took a deep breath and said, "I don't want this, Dave. I know you may doubt it, but I love you. Maybe we can find a way to reconcile and stay together." "Absolutely not, Lois. Not after discovering the extent of your infidelity," I replied firmly. "Let me be frank. If it were a fleeting affair, I might have considered reconciliation. Suppose you'd had a series of regrettable encounters before our marriage, followed by years of fidelity until one resurfaced, leading to a brief affair. I might have been able to forgive that. But a long-standing affair before we even married, before we even committed to each other? No chance whatsoever, Lois. There's no fixing this. You lavish affection on a man you claim to barely like, while the one you profess to love goes weeks, sometimes months, without it. It's futile, Lois. It just is." "Is that all?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Can't you at least give us a chance, Dave?" "I can't, Lois. I'll never trust you again, and I refuse to live like this," I said firmly. Rising from my seat, I made my way to the door. Pausing, I added, "You're an attractive woman, Lois, so I doubt you'll be single for long. If you find someone, I hope he treats you as poorly as you've treated me." With that, I exited the room and headed to the landing strip lounge. Taking a seat at the bar, Karen greeted me with a PBR. "Where have you been, handsome?" she asked. "Dealing with a divorce and not in a very social mood," I replied. "I just stopped in for a beer or two to unwind." "So does that mean I'll finally have a chance to charm you now?" she teased. I thought you were content with your boyfriend all these years, I said, raising an eyebrow. Ha! I was, until I realized he wasn't what I thought, she quipped. Deciding I'd had enough, I signaled for the bill. When Karen returned with my change, she flashed a smile and said, "When your divorce is finalized, don't forget about me, all right? I can manage that. Take care," I replied, leaving the bar in high spirits. Karen's interest in me was unexpected, but it was a boost to my confidence. Once Lois signed the papers, everything felt settled. Though I still awaited the final decision, I already felt liberated, free from the constant fear of being watched. Myra and I could finally abandon our clandestine meetings. Around 10 o'clock the next morning, she entered my office, a playful look on her face. "Lunch plans?" she asked. "Yes," I replied. "I'll leave around 11:20 and book a room." "That won't be necessary anymore," she responded with a grin. "Lois signed the papers yesterday, so we don't need to worry about avoiding something that might not have happened." At 11:30, we left for the Marriott. As the door to room 4003 shut behind us, we leaped onto the bed, savoring the freedom of not having to hide. Later, as we dressed, Myra posed a question. "What now?" "What do you mean?" I asked, slightly confused. "I mean, now that you're free," she clarified. The question caught me off guard, but I quickly formulated a response. "As long as you want me, honey, I'll stick around. But eventually I'll seek a wife. I enjoyed being married." "What qualities would you look for in a wife?" she asked curiously. "She should be attractive, love me, have the strength to tolerate me, and be a decent cook," I replied. "I can cook," she offered with a smile. I paused, realizing her true intention. In response, I said, "If you meet the criteria, I'll prioritize your application. But there's a catch. I won't engage in bigamy." She looked puzzled for a moment, but then it clicked. Beaming, she said, "Don't worry, love. Harold's days are numbered." Her words brought a sudden concern to mind, and my expression changed. Myra noticed immediately. "What's wrong, kid? What's on your mind?" she asked. "We've reached a point where we no longer need to hide things from Lois," I said. "But now we have to conceal everything from Harold. While you navigate your divorce proceedings, things could get complicated." "I may be mistaken, but I doubt it's necessary," she said confidently. "I'll present him with a choice: infidelity or irreconcilable differences. I have ample evidence of his infidelity. If I threaten to expose him, he'll likely opt for irreconcilable differences to protect his career aspirations." "Harold wants to climb the corporate ladder, doesn't he?" I asked. "Yes," she confirmed. "He's aiming for a vice presidential role. But the CEO and several board members." The board members were devout Christians, and Harold's chances of climbing the corporate ladder might plummet if his affairs were exposed. "While it might inconvenience me for a week or two in a motel, we can handle that, can't we?" Myra said confidently. Her strategy unfolded as planned, and she wasted no time putting it into action. Following my suggestion, she arranged a meeting with Ellsworth for Friday and requested Bert draft 2 sets of documents, one citing infidelity and the other irreconcilable differences. Just before the bank closed on Saturday at 11:45, she withdrew half of their checking account, all her savings, and 4 of the 6 CDs from their safe deposit box. Returning home, Myra gathered Harold's belongings. He had left town in pursuit of business opportunities, and loaded them into her car. By 3 p.m., she had checked into a motel. That evening, she returned home, prepared dinner, uncorked a bottle of wine, and sat down with Harold to reveal her hand. She confronted him with her knowledge of his affairs, backed by PI reports documenting 3 of them. Calmly, she explained that she had reached her breaking point and intended to divorce him. She detailed her financial actions, even offering to relinquish her share of the house, which exceeded her outstanding bank loan. Presenting him with divorce papers, she laid out his options and set a deadline: 10 a.m. on Monday for his decision. With a smile, she left Harold with the dirty dishes. As anticipated, Harold called her cell phone later that night and chose irreconcilable differences. By Wednesday, They met in Bert's office, where Harold signed the papers. Myra opted to stay in the motel over the weekend to let things settle. But by Sunday at 3 p.m., she checked out and moved in with me. We planned to cohabit until our divorces were finalized and then get married. However, this posed a dilemma. Myra was exceptional in her role at work and wanted to keep her job, but our company prohibited relatives from working together. While both of us could stay, one of us would eventually have to transfer, and the nearest facility was 90 miles away, impractical for us. To avoid complications, we decided to keep our marriage a secret. Myra retained her maiden name and her health insurance, preserving the status quo until, if ever, we were discovered. If that happened, she'd resign and seek another job if she wanted to, though she didn't really need to work given my substantial income. The following 2 months passed without incident, and I began to relax, a mistake I'd soon regret. Lois called once or twice a week, and I usually answered to dismiss her, finding satisfaction in doing so. I should have anticipated her persistence. One Wednesday evening, Myra and I were at the Landing Strip Lounge enjoying a few drinks. We frequented the place occasionally, though Wednesdays weren't our usual night. We were there to support one of the accounting girls, Shelley, who was trying her hand at stand-up comedy. We applauded her effort, but Myra and I agreed Shelley was better suited to accounting than show business. Her routine began with a bit about a man engrossed in reading the newspaper who gets struck on the head by his wife with a frying pan. "Why did you do that?" he asked. "For the paper I found in your pocket with Jenny's name on it," she retorted. He explained Jenny was the name of a horse he'd bet on at the races. Apologizing, the wife resumed her chores. Days later, as the man watched TV, his wife hit him again, this time with a larger pan, knocking him unconscious. When he woke, she quipped, "Your horse was calling." The audience chuckled, and the routine continued with a story about an elderly couple who, despite mutual disdain, remained married for years. Their late-night arguments often included the old man threatening to haunt his wife after his death. The neighbors, spooked by his odd behavior, suspected him of practicing black magic. After he passed away from a heart attack at 85, his funeral featured a closed casket. At the burial, the neighbors expressed concern to his widow about his potential return. She scoffed, saying, "I buried him upside down. He won't know which way to go." Just as the laughter died down, a venomous voice pierced the air. "You keep your damn hands off my man, you strumpet." I whirled around to see Lois storming toward us, her face twisted in fury. Before I could react, she poured a drink over Myra's head. Myra didn't hesitate. She retaliated by splashing her drink right back at Lois. Myra tossed her drink straight into Lois's face. Lois stumbled backward, lost her footing, and fell to the floor. Wasting no time, I grabbed Myra and pulled her out of the lounge. As we stood in the parking lot, I retrieved some rags from my trunk to dry us off. Moments later, Lois stumbled out of the door, her footing unsteady and her nose bleeding. And who was there to help her? None other than my prick cousin, Ralph. I dropped the rags and yelled, "You rotten son of a cow!" before launching myself at him. Ralph immediately let go of Lois, who collapsed to the ground, and bolted. Fueled by rage, I chased him for 3 blocks before finally giving up and heading back to the parking lot. When I returned, I found Myra pinning Lois against the fender of my car. Myra was yelling at her, "Get it into your stupid head, you stupid cow. I didn't steal him from you. You threw him away. I was just lucky enough to catch him." As I approached, Myra backed off and said, "Let's go. Get in the car. I need to go inside and straighten things out with Joe," I told her before heading back into the lounge. Inside, I found Joe, the manager, and explained the situation. He assured me there was no damage and even joked, "Next time, do it during intermission so the customers have something to watch when no one's on the mic." When I returned to the parking lot, Lois was waiting for me at the entrance while Myra was already sitting in the car. Lois stepped toward me, her voice pleading, "Please, Dave, give up the divorce. I'm dying, baby. I need you. I love you, and I know we can work this out." I shook my head in disbelief. "You must be the stupidest human being on the planet, Lois. Here you are, professing your love for me while your date, the guy who caused our divorce, is standing right there. And to top it off, you're not even discreet about it. Let it go, Lois. The only feelings I have for you now are hate and disgust. Leave me alone. With that, I walked around her, got into my car, and drove away. Both divorces were finalized not long after. I proposed to Myra, but she surprised me by saying, "Ask me again in a year, baby. Let's see if we're truly right for each other after living together for a while." I respected her wishes, and a year later I proposed again. This time she said yes. We opted for a civil ceremony at the Justice of the Peace, deciding we didn't want another big wedding. As for Lois, she ended up marrying Ralph, but their marriage didn't last long. It turned out Ralph had been cheating on her with several women. One of them gave him a disease, which he then passed on to Lois. While she found cheating on me perfectly acceptable, being cheated on herself was a different story entirely. She couldn't tolerate it. 6 years into my marriage with Myra, Ralph made the mistake of attending a family wedding where I also happened to be. I kept my long-standing promise to him that day. Let's just say it might be a while before I get another invitation to a family gathering.